Standing Committee on Public's account of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature for purposes of looking into the annual report of the Department of Health, as well as also looking into the Auditor General report, Audit Committee report of the department. The meeting is going to be conducted in two parts. The first part is going to be in closed session of the committee, which is the one that we are busy with now, the first part. and the Auditor General and the Audit Committee for purposes of being briefed by the Auditor General and the Audit Committee on the audit outcomes of the department. And thereafter we'll move to the second part, which is the department is going to join us in, and that will be an open session meeting, which is will be open to members of the public as well. Those who are interested in asking questions will be asked to do so either online or virtually. So for record purposes, I'm just gonna ask the honorable members to introduce themselves, and thereafter I will hand over to the Auditor General to take us through the report, and thereafter the Audit Committee. Honorable members.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, all members and departmental officials. My name is Wendy Kaiser-Philander and I chair the Standing Committee of Health.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Derek America. I'm a member of SCOPA. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melika Kreko. I'm a member of both the Standing Committee on Health and as well as SCOPA.
Good afternoon, Chair, honourable members, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Andrikus van der Westhuizen, a member of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Thank you very much for your information, then AG, and you are also assisted by Mr. Dustin David, who is the General Officer, as well as Masintle, who are recording the proceedings of the meetings. I'm gonna hand over to the AG. I normally say that we take the report as read. Just don't necessarily have to read the report word for word. Talk through it, raise to us those salient points that you think needs our attention, and thereafter we will ask the audit committee to also do the same as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good afternoon
Yeah. That's the book. That's the book. Welcome back, honorable members. We are resuming the we are going to start with the second part of our meeting. Having concluded the first part, this meeting of this nature on annual report to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts is held in two parts. The first part is the closed session, which is an in-committee meeting of the Public Accounts Committee together with the Auditor General and the Audit Committee for the Standing Committee to be briefed about the audit outcomes of the department's report, and as well as also to be briefed by the Audit Committee. The second part is the open session, meaning that it's open to the public. That's where we invite the department to present to us its annual report, and we deal with it together with the Auditor General's report as well as the. Now it's open to the public in the sense that they can attend preferably physically, but those who choose to attend online, we allow them. After the members of the provincial legislature have finished asking questions, we allow members of the public to also ask questions, those who want to ask questions, those who also want to participate in the meeting to participate. And thereafter we close. We're doing so because, as I've indicated, it's an open session, and we allow members of the public because we've advertised the meeting, and it has advertised in various newspapers in the official languages of the province, which is Afrikaans and isiXhosa. Now, on this second part, let me make use of the opportunity to welcome the department led by the Minister and the HOD. The minister requested to join the meeting online, and we are expecting her to join online, and also Honorable Ngondo is also online as well, member of the Standing Committee on Public Account. So is the minister in already? Okay. Now, if the minister is not in, I will just allow the HOD to make some opening remarks, and thereafter we will deal with the annual report. Now, we deal with section C and section E of the report. That is the governance component and the financial component. The other section were dealt with elsewhere, so we don't expect those members to come in and bring their fights here. So they should fight it off there elsewhere. Then here we only deal with matters. If you want to fight, you can fight about C and E. So we take those reports as read. And then once you've made the opening remarks, HOD, I will allow members to ask questions on C as well as on E. And on C first, then we deal with A. HOD, I don't necessarily say you must introduce your component, but they will just introduce themselves as and when they are going to talk or respond to questions.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And as you rightfully said, we had a session with the Standing Committee this morning, where we formally introduced the annual report. So just for the Committee of Scopa, thank you to the members for affording us the opportunity to present our annual report to you, specifically section C and E. So my opening remarks really would go in terms of the achievement that we would like to register of a fourth clean audit as quite an achievement for our department. And just to understand that achievement is the context of, it's very difficult for a health department to achieve a clean audit. We did it 4 years ago. That was the year before COVID. Then we maintained 3 consecutive clean audits, and this be the 4th one since the first audit, the third one since the first one. And the last 2 clean audits were during probably the most disruptive periods of this department's organizational life. That being 2020-21, and this year under review 21-22. During those 2 years, we've had 4 significant COVID waves. We've had significant disruption of the organizational life of our department. But one of the key things, and what we shared in the Standing Committee, is we pay tribute to all the healthcare workers that has worked tirelessly during this period of time. We've lost more than 200 healthcare workers in our department. And we, in a sense, remember their memory. We remember them in terms of what they've stood for and what they did for the people of the Western Cape. So the team of people that's with us, they will respond, as you say, Chairperson, in response to a possible response later. But I'm extremely proud to be part, to have this team. And while COVID was disrupting our lives, what we did to do, if you actually follow the Auditor General report, the internal audit reports, and you follow the Audit Committee reports, what we're proud of presenting to you is, even though we had these 2 disrupted years, we continually deepened our commitment to governance. And each year there was an improvement in performance. And that's the pride that we sit here with you in terms of those. So for the team members, completely indebted to them for the hard work, and everybody in our department that has got us to this place of a proud achievement. Then also to our partner organizations, and it's just important for us that because as a management team, we embrace the importance of assurance, especially combined assurance. We value external assurance agencies. Therefore, part of what we did intentionally is to deepen our relationship with the Auditor General. And I think we see the results of it. We take the Auditor General roles very seriously. We respond to what the Auditor General finds, and we welcome engagements with the Auditor General. Similarly, with our colleagues in the province, the forensic unit, also internal audit, but then also our audit committee. We take those roles seriously, and we take the membership at the audit committees very seriously. So I'm standing in front of you as an accounting officer that's extremely proud of the achievements of everybody in our department, but also we're proud of the relationships we've built with these key assurance agencies. We truly see them as partners, and we work to deepen our commitment to governance. So as we stand in front of you, we're obviously looking forward to engaging SCOPA. And really for you to do your oversight in relation to our performance, we humbly subject ourselves to the process with yourselves. Thank you.
I see the minister come in. Honorable Minister.
Yes. Good afternoon, Chair, and also good afternoon to everyone. I tried to come in and out, but at the time, I think you were not there for someone to open it for me. Thank you very much for having this opportunity to be able to present the financial and the governance side of our annual report. I'm sorry that now I'm not there, but I was there earlier. The audit committee, I think is the new chair, although he's not new in the seat. We want to welcome him if he's there. I didn't pick up whether he's there or not. And also with the AG for being with us throughout. We came, Chair, as very difficult kind of a department. Probably the AG could be able to attest to that difficulty in the sense that because we were saying that the way we work so hard to make sure that the public purse is not only utilized effectively, but the effort that our staff throughout, not only those ones who are sitting there, but across the province, the effort they put up in making sure that they're doing as much as they can in regard to not only to the expenditures, but also in terms of the collecting the necessary data that is required. Whilst the AG does quite a lot of work, we must also indicate that it's a pity that but at the same time, probably it's a good thing that we are not audited in everything. Of course, Program 2 will always be by the biggest. Also, Chair, this report, it also comes during the time that we were affected by two waves. Plus, also, you were coming from when the national indicated that the AG also needs to do a separate auditing of the PPEs when we started with the pandemic. So our team tried to make as much as possible under the circumstances and also under the conditions that we were in. So I want to commend the team for to be able to achieve what they've achieved now under the circumstances. Plus, also we take into consideration in regard to which is the team will be able to attest to in terms of the part of the 0.9. There's less than 3% actually of the money that was underspent. Plus, also in terms into consideration what the AG also has actually alerted us to some of the indicators that were not audited during this, but have been put part of the MTSF until the 2024, which is related to the maternal mortality and all of those. And also we take into consideration the risk factors that the AG has also warned us against in regard to the irregular expenditures, in as much as they are minimal as they are, but we need to respect the process. And then lastly, Chair, we want also to thank that one of the stumbling blocks potential rescue, the provincial procurement regulations related to the steel, that steel products and also its components in terms of the local production and so forth. Because it's one of those where we're not sure where we are going to, but I'm glad that eventually by the time the report was finalized, all of those were finalized. So, Chair, yes, indeed, we do know that clean finance, clean audits is not necessarily is about service delivery, but after engaging earlier this morning with the other parts of the annual reports, indeed, we are very proud when we link those. Those some may not be able to see through that. When we link the other parts and also this, indeed, 2021, 2022 was a really difficult year, but we have managed to achieve what we could have achieved. Thank you very much from the team. I'll be listening, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Now, honorable members, remarks that have been made by the Minister, want to check, are there any questions you would like to have? Department, as I've said, that we take the report as read. Can I get an indication of those members who would like to ask questions on section C or part C of the report? And part C, you will find it start at 125. Honorable America has indicated you want to talk. Honorable Kego, Honorable Van Dezen. In that order.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Dr. Kluter and colleagues. My name is Derek America, and I'm a member of SCOPA. Chairperson, let me take this opportunity, and I'm sure my colleagues in the morning session has done that too. Congratulate the department and the officials and all those unsung heroes that are not with us today for achieving the impossible. I mean, and I know this is a department with lots of complexities and one of the biggest budgets, and what they have managed to achieve over the 4 years or 5 years is outstanding, and there's no other department in this country who has ever done that, and it is through the hard work and dedication of a number of people and the leadership that's not only here in front of us, but it's also out there in the decentralized locations. So, Chair, having said it, and we also have a great deal of sort of indebtedness to this department for us being here today, because their dedication and hard work has carried us through the most difficult period in living memory, for us at least, and certainly for myself, and I'm extremely grateful for that. So, Chairperson, in compliance with your requests, that we express a particular question with regard to section 6C. I just have one question, Chair, because I've gone through the audit report, and it is almost a perfect 10. It's on page 133, and it is the second bullet under training, and it deals with special ad hoc investigations. Now, I can conjure up, but those kind of investigations are, but there's a specific reference made to the head of department. So maybe, we can get just a little more sort of detail around that, because sometimes people do make allegations for nefarious reasons and purposes, but certainly I'm not going to speculate on that. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Kego.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon again to everyone. I'm on page 127. No, 126, let me say. 126. The department lists a number, a total of 11 risks that are of serious concern. It refers to them as strategic, and of which the list is proper because it talks to reality. But what we want to understand is what is the department's interventions as far as that is concerned, so that it's not just highlighted as risk and then we see them next year again and another year and another year. In particular, in areas such as, because we dealt with it earlier on, but differently. Now, because you highlighted as one of the challenges, but now it resurfaces here as a risk now, the staff burnout. That how do we overcome such a critical challenge? Because without the staff, then we don't have a service. And then also, I see there in your emerging risk in the same page, there is a medical legal that is highlighted as a high rating. If you can just clarify that. Thanks, Chair.
Honorable van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, on page 244, you refer to the sharp drop-off in the expenditure of road and rail transport, that this was due to the discontinuation of the red dot taxi service.
Which page are you, Honorable van der Westhuizen?
244. Sorry, are you still with C?
Yes,
My
please.
apologies.
Yes, please. You are way ahead of us. You are way ahead of us. Honorable Nkondlo.
No, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to colleagues and also to the Minister and her delegation. Chair, I just wanted to start on the page on the risks that in Part C that the department is outlining in their report. Strategic risks around fragmented PHC services in the city of Cape Town. Just want to understand how big is this risk, and at this point, what measures have the department put in place to try and deal with this? And can they just provide us what number of these PHC services that remain in the city, and at what point will they be integrated into the province, if that would be the plan? The second one would be on the built environment that does not enable performance. Now, with regard to it being a high risk, and lots of them currently happening in the infrastructure, and the issue of safety concerns and staff burnout. What again are responses that are practical that the department can actually share with us? And also, given the fact that we're all sitting currently with this problem of load shedding, which severely hits public health services in particular, what kind of response mechanisms do some of your public health facilities actually you've provided for in dealing with load shedding, and also water restrictions if they're affected by these? I mean, we know the province have been talking about the MER, the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, which also still is a long-term program, but in the now, if all your public health facilities, as an example, as a response, have generators as alternative capacity to kick in when there is a load shedding. Do you have any gaps, and what is the extent of that gap, if you do have it at this point? And also, Chair, the last one is that on page 128, in terms of minimizing conflict of interest, there is a requirement in terms of policy that all must sign the documents of, to declare. Now, how strong are these departmental control measures as to sort of foolproof the department from those that would want to take chances? And one ask this in relation to the case that is already put there as part covered in Part E. Okay, can you hear me now on my last one?
Yes.
Can I repeat myself on the last one?
Yes.
Okay, I was asking on page 128, Chair,
Yes.
minimizing conflict of interest, where there's a requirement for declarations annually. And I'm asking how efficient or effective is this policy of the department and its implementation if you have in Part E a case of a non-disclosure which resulted in irregularity. So that was my third and last question for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Honorable Benford.
Chair, good afternoon once again to everyone. Chair, mine is on page 130. I just want to check with the department. The amount may seem small for someone. However, the kind of cases that led to irregularities were very serious in nature. I therefore wish to understand how the so-called effective compliance control failed to pick up and prevent those incidents. And then on table, page 138, can the committee be finished with copies of the quarterly reports from Treasury about BEE compliance? And can the committee be finished with details of ownership of these service providers, including names of directors, shareholders, and addresses of the companies? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, there's just most of the questions I was going to ask are very much related to the questions that have been asked by members. There's just one issue I want to ask in relation to the audit committee. It's similar to an experience we got in one of the audit committees. Now I know Dr. Lawrence is a seasoned public servant, so we know him from previous time. Now, I don't know whether, because we came across a question whereby we also had someone who was in the public sector or especially in the Auditor General, came the audit committee chairperson as well. And the question was asked whether is there no requirement of a cooling period before you can exercise this kind of report. I'm raising this because maybe also Dr. Lawrence can also assist as well as the department as well in that regard, even the AG as well. Because in the instance we came across before, it was explained that, look, there is something like that, but that was complied with. Honorable America.
Thank you, Chair. Just a process question, Chair. The Honourable Van Vogel directed the question to the department. Can the department provide information regarding contractors and directors and so on? I mean, how correct is that in terms of that? Shouldn't that be done by a resolution of the department because of this committee, whereas the department would be sort of obligated to respond either yes or no? I mean, that if it becomes a necessary need, then it should be directed via the committee in the form of a resolution and not, put directly to the department that can you supply us or would you, what's Please guide me, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think the Honorable Van Vogel wants the department to first deal with the issue of submission. So the question is it compliant? If so, can they provide proof? That's the question. Can you prove yourself to be compliant with PEA, triple PEA? And if so, can you be able to provide proof? That is a question, and of which that's a level of accountability that we're here for. I don't see any sinister action around that. I think that's the purpose of why we are here. Because it's here in the report that it is compliant. And then the Honorable says, if it is so, can then we be furnished with such a proof? But we can even take it through as a resolution later on. But after the department has responded, let's hear first the response from their side and as well as the HE, they are here. So, and then we take it from there. And then we can maybe play the lawyer and the advocate role later on through resolution.
Now, any member who wants to ask a question can ask a question. How he or she feels like asking that question is supposed to be an open session. But also, let's allow the department to respond. If they say they can, they can. If they can't, they can't. It's just how I feel, you know. I know there are also some questions I feel uncomfortable about, or sometimes for the lack of the I don't like, but I can't tell members how they must ask their questions. So I allow them to do that. So let me just maybe, I think also, I don't think the question was want it now. By way of resolution as well. I think you know, we will deal with that. The more kind of a resolution related question. Department?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So there's quite a few questions that I will refer to Mr. K. But let me first start by just indicating to Mr. K. So the issue about the special and ad hoc investigations, Honorable America, the detail will be provided by Mr. K, if we can just follow that. Then the issue around irregular expenditure and BEE reports and compliance, I'll ask Mr. K to respond to. So let me start off by addressing the range of issues that were raised around risks, and then we'll take the conversation from there. So thank you very much for those questions. So if I take Member Kleko's questions about risks, and you specifically raised two key issues, which is staff burnout and medical legal risk. And on the risk page of 126, you'll see both of those have got a rating, a residual rating of high. So your question was, what do we do to mitigate? So because both staff burnout and medical legal is high, the first thing we've done as a senior management team, and we meet once a month, on our agenda as a formal part of our work as a senior management team, is risk is a standing item on our agenda. What we have done is we have duly authorized a risk committee. So Ms. Nkosi is the Chief Director for Strategy, is the chairperson of that risk committee. She draws members from all the sections of the department, and as a committee, a subcommittee of our senior management team, they have to go through each of our risks. They have to see what have we put in place, and in terms of what we put in place, what is the residual rating. So our residual ratings then, because of the measure of what we put in place, start shifting over time. So some of the risks you'll see is going into low, some is medium, but some remain high. Our principal decision is that committee actually, now that you ask it, Member Tlego, is actually sitting in the next week or so. And one of the doing is we've mandated them in our last senior management meeting to do a rigorous exercise about all the mitigation we're taking for every single risk, evaluate that mitigation, and really look at the criteria for assigning the residual risk. And if a residual risk is extreme, we immediately elevate that to the direct responsibility of the senior management team. So if there are extreme risks, we immediately will assign oversight at our level with real mitigation and reporting on that matter until the residual risk shifts. If it's high, we keep a monitoring eye on it. And obviously, we would want to see that the mitigation is done at the level below us as a senior management team. If it is moderate, if it's low, so then we work according. So that is, let's call it our risk strategy that we've adopted at our senior management team meeting. So let's come to the two specific risks. So staff burnout is something that we take extremely seriously. And as you rightfully said, we touched on some of it in this morning's exercise. But let me just give you the following undertaking. Our employee wellness program is probably, because we take it so seriously, we've now approached the Department of the Premier to say that the transversal tender and contract for employee health and wellness does not meet the specific needs of the pressured environment of our specific employees. So we've now got a provincial top management decision that there are two tenders. There's one going out for the higher needs of our department, and then there's a transversal tender that goes out for all Western Cape government employees. In doing that, we've also got permission now, or we did it so in provincial top management because all the other heads of departments actually supported us in that. So if there's extreme risk or higher order cases in other departments, they can utilize our contract. And we can also utilize basically for the more medium and lower risk activities from the other tender. So just to give you that kind of assurance, but besides the tender, which provides for higher order services, that mitigates, that helps us for mental well-being and preventing people to move into breakdown and burnout, we also have a very vibrant in-house team that does additional work in support of our staff. So because we did a lot of work in COVID in terms of intentional healing and grieving, and all of those work, and the take-up has been 30%, as we reported this morning. We believe through these measures, we probably will have a higher take-up because we now will become intentional in the way of reaching out to people that might not present themselves and say, let's identify the early signs of burnout. Let's report, let's see, let's intervene. And more our staff members are trusting it. It's not an intervening for the employee wants to know what's wrong with me. This is more accepted by the culture of the employee cares about me. And we're now willing to actually work into that. So that's what we're doing with staff burnout. And we really believe that we are setting some benchmark practices in relation to this. We also have a staff satisfaction survey that actually came out. It's internationally benchmarked. And the staff satisfaction survey is now benchmarking us as a high performance organization comparable with the benchmark set internationally for health organizations, which we're extremely proud of. To go to medical legal, we have a medical legal unit within our department. The medical legal unit's primary purpose is to look at all the cases of claims coming in and assess the merits of the claim. So these are medical professionals. They are very familiar with what the medical terms are, what people are complaining about, and they screen that effectively to make sure whether there's merit, whether we should defend the case, whether we should settle, whether the case should be rejected. That's already, the national DG has come to us, he's benchmarked that practice, and they want to introduce that across the country. Then that medical legal unit that's in our department also has a medical legal unit extension in legal services and in the State Attorney's Office. So again, it's another model that's being benchmarked for the rest of the country. And it's so much so that what we've put in place, the assurance levels is so high at the moment that the SIU recently met with me and Mr. K to say that they are really, what's the word? They are assured that the systems and pressures we have, the measures we have in place does not require any further investigation under the presidential proclamation of the SIU. And similarly, the Auditor General has done a sector audit around our controls in there. So we're pretty assured at the moment from external agencies that our system works actually quite extremely well for medical legal claims. Then to go to Honourable Nkondlo's questions, then on the same vein, if you then go to the ones listed in terms of that, so let me start with the fragmented services in City of Cape Town. So you'll see that the residual risk is now moderate on that. The reason why it's moderate is that our undertaking with the City of Cape Town has been that there has been very close relationship and work with us. That as of the 1st of July in this year, which is 3 months ago, we transferred 10 facilities that was previously under the City of Cape Town. And we assumed responsibility for that as the Western Cape government. The managers in this team have visited those facilities. And I'm very glad to say to you, literally we were there, I think within 3 or 4 weeks or 2 weeks even in some cases. 4 weeks later, 5 weeks later, it was a completely seamless exercise. It is as if we've always run the services. You speak to the clients in the waiting rooms. The client says, "Look, it's one service. We're not going from one to the other, and we're not waiting here and being sent there." We speak to the staff. The staff will tell you, for years we've been under the same wall, and we've had the city here, the province there. It is a completely different world to work in. So that's only 10 facilities. But those 10 facilities actually are quite a significant footprint of work, including the biggest one, probably, that the City of Cape Town was in, which was in Nolengile. So the next step with the City of Cape Town is, how do we work with the City of Cape Town to get a decision that the rest of the services becomes part of Western Cape government? So that is obviously a process that we're now engaging with the City of Cape Town colleagues, and hopefully in terms of the, let's call it the alignment between the city and the province, we want to utilize the alignment to actually get that done in the foreseeable future. The next question that the member asked, which was the built environment, so I'm not going to take each one of them. Built environment is still a high risk. I'm going to ask Mr. K just to reflect on the built environment risk of high. The staff burnout I've already dealt with, but then there's load shedding and water. That I just quickly want to put something on the table, and then Mr. K can talk about the built environment. The issue about load shedding is that currently, if you look at our health facilities, from the smallest clinic all the way to the biggest hospital like Grootskee and Tygerberg, what we're doing is we have an array of interventions to mitigate the risk. So on the biggest facilities, Grootskee, Tygerberg, Red Cross, we've had an agreement with the City of Cape Town for the last 4 years. They are spared of load shedding up until level 6. And actually, we've not reached level 6. So actually, those 3 hospitals have not had load shedding for the last 4 years. If you go to the lower end, which is our clinics, the smallest clinics across the rural areas, the smallest clinics is too small to have a full generator service at that facilities. So we've not reached with generators at all of that. So what we're doing from the smallest facility side is we're now going with solar panels and inverters as the solution to go to sustainable energy from the smallest facilities. Our team has started, and they're working their way up from the smallest facilities with solar panels, inverters, and it's starting to work very well, and it's moving very quickly. So all you have is the hospitals and the facilities in between. And the in-between ones is where we've had generators, quite big generators. Obviously, the big ones like Grootskee, Tygerberg, Red Cross also has generators in case you go to level 7. And those generators are then make sure that they are up to their working condition, that they're serviced, and that we don't have a break in service. So what we've done now is our strategy is to increase our coverage with solar panels and inverters from small to big. And we are negotiating with the city and ESCOM for exemptions from big to small. We have successfully negotiated 7 additional facilities with the city and ESCOM, so you would recognize the 7. So it would be that Somerset Hospital is now exempt, Richards Plain Hospital is exempt, Mowbray Maternity Hospital is exempt, Victoria Hospital is exempt, while Bremer Hospital is exempt, and Westville Hospital is exempt, right? And then in addition to that, George Hospital is also exempt. The one which we're working for solution with, ESCOM, is Khayelitsha. Khayelitsha is so embedded in the grid. It is very difficult to exempt Khayelitsha because then you have to exempt an entire area. So we're trying to find a technical solution to have Khayelitsha exempt. But we're still sticking to our priorities at those other big hospitals. Makes no sense to jump Khayelitsha and go to smaller ones. We need to get a solution for Khayelitsha. And then similarly, with all the other hospitals like Easter River and all the other hospitals, we're doing systematically things. So at the moment, we went from 3 to 10. Our intention is to go from 10 to 20 for exemption. So we still want another 10 hospitals to be exempted. And we're working with ESCOM and the city to actually do that. And then on water, you will see in the annual report further on, we've actually met all our water saving targets. So with day 0, we put in systems in place for effective water use. We have grey water, we have tanks, we have water meters for with water usage. We pick up, we have boreholes, what is that osmosis thing? Reverse osmosis. So it's a whole range of things. And we did that as well from our biggest water users. So again, we start with the biggest water users to get them less and less dependent on water supply from the municipality and look towards sustainability in terms of that. So let me stop with those in terms of the risks. The conflict of interest signatures, I'm going to ask Mr. K, are you going to take it? Okay, so he wants to take it, Ronel. So I'll ask the conflict of interest for that as well. And as I said, irregular expenditure in the BEE reports. Then, Chairperson, just your question about the cooling off period. What we do when it comes to members serving on the audit committee, we are guided by .P, the risk unit of .P. And that's Henriette Robson. There's very clear guidelines, very clear procedures. And all of those procedures, so we don't decide process. We are guided by Henriette on what process and who qualifies and when the person gets qualified. There's a very clear vetting process that it goes through. So it's a very rigorous process in terms of that. According to us, there is nothing that prevents Dr. Lawrence from being on the committee. He was an ordinary committee member. When a previous chairperson vacated, he became the chairperson after that. But it's through that entire vetted process with Henriette Robson and the .P colleagues. So, Chairperson, with your permission, we'll go to the colleagues to just address Mr. K, the special ad hoc investigations, the conflict of interest, the built environment risk, the irregular expenditure, and the BEE.
Thank you, HRD. Thank you, and good afternoon to the committee members. Good afternoon, Chair. So the special ad hoc investigations, it's not about Dr. Kluti. We get referrals from the Public Service Commission, and then people make complaints directly to Dr. Kluti's office as the head of department, and we then have a unit that does the investigations. So we're never quite sure what's going to come up. It might be around a conditional service, or it might be around a salary, or it might be around an aggrieved employment process. There's all sorts of things that come up in that period. And that unit then investigates, because we also have a responsibility to respond to the Public Service Commission. There are a number of interactions that happen with the Public Service, but it's not about Dr. Kluti. So I think that's the first one. Let me talk about the built environment. There's an enormous number of external factors that are making the built environment very complicated in this country at the moment. There are fewer contractors that are able to do the specialist work that is required within the health system. The cost of infrastructure is becoming pretty prohibitive, particularly when you start bringing in the health technology. And the cost of maintaining is also becoming, because the value is increasing, so the requirement to maintain is also becoming higher and higher, and the allocations aren't necessarily keeping track of that. So there is a real competition, and I think, again, I think Dr. Kluti has articulated a little bit about the fact that we do have to often prioritize. And that's where we find ourselves a lot within the infrastructure space. On top of that, internally, there has been the built environment, and particularly maintenance, requires individuals who are qualified, have qualifications within the built environment. And again, that's becoming quite a scarce skill. It's defined in the CIBD Act, and that just tends to compound, I think, some of the risks that we have within this particular space. On the conflict of interests, so I must say, we don't, as a department, and this will always be, we are reliant on the honesty and the integrity of our staff to complete the forms. However, there are a number of agencies who are then able to check that beyond what is in our own databases. So, for example, we cannot see if somebody's doing business with a municipality. We can't see if somebody's doing business with another government department in another province. But there are ways and means. And one of the things that the Auditor General does is they have the ability to do that because they look at the whole of the system. And when they find exceptions, they give us those exceptions, and then we act against the individuals that are found in that. And we have so few people because they know, just don't do it because there's going to be a consequence for you to come through. So again, because we've got this culture of I guess, compliance, our conflicts are few and far between. Not that we'll ever be able to eliminate them, and that also then goes into the irregular expenditure. We do hundreds of thousands of transactions across hundreds of entities on a daily basis. And to be able to prevent every single transaction that could be potentially irregular with all of the complexities that exist within the public procurement system is unlikely, and it's now impossible. What I'm comfortable about is that our detection controls are working. So we've got in this, and we talk about an internal control unit. So we have, and Dr. Kluti spoke about the combined assurance. So we have the front line, the first level of assurance, which is our managers, people that should be doing the checking and the balancing. The second line of assurance is our own internal control unit, which is detached. So they have their own audit programs, and they move across the province, and they do tests of batches of documents. So we pick things up there. Then you've got your third line of assurance, which includes the internal audit team, as well as the Auditor General. And for us to come out with 8 million rands worth of irregular expenditure, I think it's fair to say that our detection controls are working. From there is a process around condemnation and individual investigation, both current year and things that we find from the previous years. But there's a separate process which is quite well worn, documented, that we go through on that. So on the BBE, we are required to report the information to the Commissioner, which we will now do for this year. We've got to wait for this to become published, and then we report it. In terms of the details We are not the custodians of the supplier evidence bank or the central supplier database. The custodians of that are provincial and national treasuries. So in terms of having the details of all the individuals, that's where the detail will be found, because it's our assumption is once you get to the list of the people that are coming off that, it's been validated and checked. That said, we do still do our own checks as part of our procurement processes. So that's where the information ultimately would be sourced from. The last one, I think I'm done. Thank you very much, Chair.
Any follow-ups?
Chair, there's still a hand, Member Nkondlo. I'm not sure whether it's an old hand.
I think it's a previous hand.
Chair, when you open for follow-up, that's why I didn't withdraw the hand, because I've got follow-ups.
Can you do a follow-up?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, please do.
Okay, Chair, can I start with the CFO on the last issue about evidence on BBBE? And I would like to check with the CFO that what is the current or is the department actually have its own BBBE certificate, which is evidence of its compliance from the BBBE Commission? That I think is what would be able to answer the question raised earlier on as a confirmation of its BE status. Also, another follow-up, Chair. I thought I wanted to pick up on what the HOD is raising about some of the issues around staff, and perhaps also the minister can be able to respond to this one. That what would be their stance? Because I think year in and year out, one of the things that I've known that provincial government has been trying to do is manage COE. And in managing COE, also that had to do with trying to streamline, the kind of personnel cost of the province. And I'm raising this issue, Chair, because already, I mean, if you talk, and I'm not saying staff burnout means you must employ new people. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm just speaking in the bigger context, of what the pressures of COVID-19 that we've seen, particularly in service interfacing departments like the Department of Health. And I think we also saw this with the Department, I think, of Agriculture, if it was not Environmental Affairs, that was, on the other hand, based on the current financial environment that we're in, there is an objective, and it's a government-wide. I know even National Treasury would want to see how departments are keeping their personnel lean. But the truth of the matter is that the pressure to interface with people had actually forced the current staff employment to actually do double to triple workload, including in the Western Cape context, which Minister is something that she would always raise also in her debates in Parliament, is the growth that you are able to pick up, particularly in this department as a health provisioning department, the increase of population size in the Western Cape. And my interest is, how are we balancing these two? On one hand, trying, to, from a fiscal point of view, to manage, our personnel cost or COE, but on the other, we've got a service delivery burden that requires people, because I'm relating this to staff burnout, is that you end up having to have people that must do a more workload than they would have been in a different circumstance. So I just wanted to hear from both the HOD and the minister around that particular sort of objective that is the state we're all trying to follow. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Honorable Keko.
Thanks, Chair. The first follow-up to what I wanted to check that in most departments, when we deal with the issue of medical legal, in most departments, they heavily rely on state attorney in terms of services and everything. And now, noting that when it comes to this department, you have even though you've got something like a sub-component that works hand in glove with the state attorney, which means therefore that I want to understand now if does that translate to additional costs than what is happening in other departments, and if yes, then because I've heard earlier on here when people were here from the public, some were complaining and like intimidating of even making some litigations against the department because it's based on ambulance didn't arrive and all those kind of things. Are you working under serious duress in terms of litigations that would result in you, and if there are any additional costs in that regard? Then coming to the issue of I'm very much pleased with the response regarding the risk strategic plan that you are dealing with, and the team that you have established, the risk committee that is dealing with the monitoring. But what I also wanted to understand is that are they dealing with all risks, or they are dealing with strategic, and then there is this different operation that deals with emerging risks, or they compiled all the risks together?
HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So I'll leave the triple B EE feedback for Mr. K. So let me start off with the staffing or the COE. Let's call it the COE imperative. The member's asking a very important question, and that goes to the heart of the complexity of our organization. I think Member America was talking about the complexity. The complexity of our organization is that we have escalating and increasing need, but we don't have matching resources to match that need. So in this morning's session with the Standing Committee, we explored that actually quite significantly. So the challenge that sits with that is that the need exceeds our ability to respond to the need. And I also said to the committee this morning that is not a unique thing to us. It is a global phenomenon. Over lunchtime, we were talking about reading some of the things at the NHS and what people are doing in the States and in other countries. It sounds very much the same things that we're facing in first world countries. So if you take that as a reality, what we have to balance is to say that the resources we do get, we optimally utilize the resources to the best of our ability to impact the best that we can do. Now, in that lies, at the heart of that, lies that our staff then have to be protected so that we can maximally support our staff to be able to do the best that they can do with what we can deploy. So I think the reality is, just saying that we should have more staff is not going to be something that's going to realize. The financial outlook for the coming years is not that great. So therefore, we have always and have implemented something called an approved post list in our department. So we do control expenditure, staff expenditure in our department, and we do it quite tightly. But what we also then have to now measure, and that's where the difficulty comes in of the question that the member asked, is not so much also what we are able to do, but it's becoming explicit about what we are not able to do. Because the only way that you can protect staff is you can say we can only push our staff to that level. We cannot go beyond. And I guess the member that asked the question, how we take let's call it this way. We take the COE limitation seriously because we're limited by budget, but we take the well-being of our staff also seriously. And what we try to do at all times is get the balance between the two. So we know that we are asking staff to do more than what they necessarily would have done if other staff was around. But getting the balance right is actually the core of our business. I think when you have a low turnover rate and you have more people applying to want to work in your setting, you are still an employer of choice and you still want people to actually work in your organization and they feel proud. So we do take those measures quite seriously. That's why I said the staff satisfaction survey that benchmarks us to a high performance organization globally means that we are probably getting this balance right. It doesn't mean we have to rest on our laurels. We must constantly check in with our staff. And that's why it's important for us to work with our staff, to be very clear about expectations, but to protect the staff as a primary thing. Minister Mbombo has gone as far as said, and I'm speaking on her behalf, I apologize, Minister, that without staff, there's no health service. So what we've learned out of COVID is we now need to err on the staff of looking after our staff. That's why we're going to all this lengths to address and mitigate staff burnout as our key risk. And again, Member Tletlo, just to come back to your general question about our mechanism. Our follow-up, the mechanism for risk is a mechanism that we own as a senior management team. But what we have done, that committee advises the senior management team of what the senior management team needs to apply their mind to, because that puts the whole organization at risk. So therefore, we are not dealing at our level with a risk that only poses a risk to one part of the organization. These are the transversal risks. What our expectation is, and that's what we're now inculcating with a governance reform in our organization, is that every manager in their institution will do and replicate what we're doing at another level of the organization. We want every manager to have a risk committee, to have risk on their radar, and for them to deal with the risk that's relevant to their element. Once we have inculcated that through the organization, that will be when our governance system falls into place. But that's something that we are considering at our senior management team. And then your last question about the medical legal. The system that we have is actually the most efficient system in the country, because we have in-house capacity, we have state attorney capacity, and we have our legal services in .P capacity. What we've been able to do in each of the three is to circumscribe people that only works on this. So we've been able to convince the state attorney to give us people that only works on this. We've been able to convince .P legal services to give us people that only works on this. So what you now have is you got a team, but it sits in three different places. And therefore, we don't carry the cost of all of it. So it's a very efficient system that people in other provinces are trying to copy, but they have more people than our unit, but they are less successful. And that's part of the reason why we're more successful. Thank you. I think the MEC, sorry, I probably should have gone after the minister. Thank you, sir.
Chair, Masai?
Minister, let me just
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to ask Mr. Carrick to just talk around the interaction with the Commissioner. Which he actually does. So thanks, Glenn.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee.
Honorable Nkondo.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee. The Department of Trade and Industry that is responsible for broad-based black economic empowerment and sets the policy thereof. They issued a clarification letter to the department in February 2020 because there was a bit of confusion what was required. In this, it stated what was the expectation for us to report in the annual report and also to submit on an annual basis following the publication of annual report to the BEE Commission. The department has complied with that requirement for the past, well, for forever how long it's been requested by them to do so. So I'm happy to provide the template and the letter that they issued us to the members so that you can be aware of what our BEE requirement is. And just to answer the question, that requirement does not require us to undergo a BEE audit and be issued with a BEE certificate as a private company or supplier would have to undergo. Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to piggyback what Dr. Kluti has tried to show in terms of how we recognize the burden. Actually, once we talk about the staff, remember also our staff also probably might have some of the elements or the symptoms of a burnout, because it has been 2020 ever since. I recently went to Khayelitsha also to address the issue of the mental well-being of our staff. What they were saying was that, yes, we had COVID, yes, we have got a high level of the pressures. But one thing that actually puts the last nail on the coffin is about, out of all, when we are trying so hard under the circumstances and conditions, but you get patients who beat you up. I'm not sure whether you're aware that there are many of the staff members, not only in Khayelitsha, but everywhere, where they are robbed, and also others where you'll find that they are actually assaulted. I'm not even talking about the EMS, what we normally get used to that. It's because some people come drunk, some relatives because they don't want to wait and they're panicking, and some others. It's just a manifestation of the violence that is happening outside. So we are not exempted as supposed to be a healing space in regard to the violence that we now see even in our facilities, where we even saw even patients even attacking each other. So the example that I'm making, Member Nkondo, to just to paint a picture of how I feel right now, it's an Airbus. I'm a captain, or I am flying this Airbus. In the Airbus, we have got passengers, whether 300 or something like that. Within the passengers, we also have got the crew. Of course, the crew will always be fewer than the passengers. In as much as that we ensure that it is a bus, the safety, it meets all the measures of the safety, and also we make sure that we provide the passengers comfort and everything, chicken or beef and everything. And also when it's turbulence, which is where we are now, that we make sure to remind them to put on their seat, they must not go to the bathroom and so forth. But where we are now, we are in a situation where you find that it's so difficult even to fly the Airbus. So difficult to such an extent that you have to make sure you prioritize the crew, because by the time we land, we might end up not having crew anymore. And what's going to happen to the traveled passengers? So for me, when I say staff comes first, in order to make the clients and communities to come first. When I remind people that we are humans too, we bleed the same color, we cry the same tears, it's about reminding ourselves. It's not that staff are not coming from the same communities. When there's a load shedding in our hospital, it does affect the staff also in their own homes, where they have to think what's going to happen to my child, to my family, or how I'm going to go back in the dark, going back home. When we're talking about the issues of what now we're talking about the numbers, they understand, because we have got the culture of being transparent in this government, in terms of that this is your approved post list, this is your budget, this is your resources, you can move around within the budget items. Once they understand that, probably based on the pressures that we have, I could be able to at least to get more 5 or 10. But they understand how things are. From our side, when we say that, let's look at this, let's look even how the budgets, we should do the budgets. Equitable share, provincial equitable share versus in terms of the needs, and also in terms of the equity, that's what we'll. So some people understand that one has to prioritize the people of the Maritzburg versus probably the people of maybe the Ocean View in that other circumstances. But what matters is about no matter what, we must always be together with the staff, as we have been even during the time of the COVID. So when we were doing the Jerusalem dancing, it wasn't about that we were competing about how to dance. It was about in a situation where you find that you are at your lowest moments, but we have to make something that we can be able to cheer the staff in regard to that part. So I will welcome the staff members as well when they go for the oversight, irrespective, of course, they will make sure that things are done accordingly, but at the same time, don't lose that opportunity to cheer them up, just to say thank you for being there, because many of them actually have got many options. They've got quite higher qualifications. They can go to overseas, they can go to the private, but they choose to stay there and work there. So that's why for us, as I've said, that out of all the building blocks that the World Health Organization make a suggestion to strengthen the health system, the human resource for health, staff come first, so that they can make the patient to come first. And then lastly, we have seen in the space of the media about the issues of the wage bill. We don't know, it's one of the risks, which we don't know it's gonna end up when it comes to salary increase, or about the cash bonuses. We don't know under the circumstances that we've seen in other sectors like the private or SOEs, they're demanding increase, and we're aware that there hasn't been much of an increase for the public sectors. So we are crossing our fingers that in as much as they are so dedicated, we don't know what could happen. Plus also as much that they are also dedicated, but indeed when they are trying so much, but they're being beaten, people even kick them and all of those, it becomes too much for them. So we do as much as we can. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. Remarks and your responses on some of the questions that has been asked by members. A very interesting example we are making of the airline, especially in relation to the crew members and the passengers. I think also we might have left out when it comes to how staff are being treated even by the public. Might have left out that there is one of the airlines that's got a notice that says that while we understand traveling on air can be very stressful, please don't be rude to our. There is one of the airline that's got a notice like that. So yeah, it's not a good experience actually, because some of these health workers, they are family members, they are mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, so the whole thing of them being affected by stress might have a rippling effect. So no, thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for that. Now, honorable members, if there are no follow-up questions on C, I want us to move to E. If I can get an indication of members who would like to ask questions on E, is obviously financial matters, and also will be dealing with the reports of the Auditor General as well as the Audit Committee as well. Can I get an indication? Honorable Van der Westhuizen was the one who indicated, Honorable America, also Honorable Khego, Honorable Van Vogel. Okay, let's go in that order. It's Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
Thank you.
He raised his hand way before, even on section C, so first come, first serve.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I refer you to page 222, Health Facilities Management. You then refer to an underspending of 12%, where you say that the underspending can be attributed to delays in the appointment of key engineering and technical staff. Then also goods and services, delayed implementation of maintenance projects due to, amongst others, SCM limitations, slow progress on projects, etc. Then on the next page, 224, there is reference of a health facility revitalization grant. And there also seemed to be an underspending of 56 million rand on that grant. And again, you give the reasons there as a result of the knock-on effect of COVID-19, scope amendments to existing projects. So again, SCM delays and limitations, and then also health technology items that delayed in terms of. So my first question, Chair, it seems to me as if, you know, our facilities, the maintenance of our facilities, the upgrading of our facilities is a high priority. And I know in many cases, people are complaining about, you know, our clinics not being able to cope with the numbers, that there's not adequate shelter for people. And, you know, the majority of people visiting clinics, I presume, are people that are already feeling sick or frail or in need of not being exposed, you know, to the elements, etc. So my first question is, to what extent can we see an improvement of this situation now, perhaps post-COVID? And is this money lost? The money that was not spent, will it be rolled over? And is this a provincial grant, or is it perhaps a national grant that you know, we've applied for? Very much, you know, like to hear that. And then we've also engaged with the Auditor General's office earlier on, and you will see that one of their emerging risks is a change in terms of the inventory system that will be required going forward. And then they quite clearly state that a due date for the implementation of this has not yet been announced. Now, I'm highly concerned, you know, because we have seen in the past that sometimes announcements and directives and so on don't really keep track with the practical situation or the challenges on the ground, if I can call it like that. And the question was, for example, whether our existing software, which I presume might be best software that you use, is providing for that kind of inventory, etc. Because my impression was, and I made the point, that your inventory software, I think, must be at a highly advanced kind of software, keeping track of expiry dates, of movement of pharmaceuticals, etc. And that perhaps you might be sitting with a Rolls Royce, but you will now be required to drive, you know, a much simpler vehicle in terms of the financial reporting that must be. So will your system be able to speak to the system that the Auditor General is eventually going to come and audit when it comes to inventory? Thank you, Chair.
America?
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, earlier I raised the question to the AG about the ostensibly high audit costs of over 22.5 million rand, and the response was that it's, you know, it's an accumulative total more than one year. I know the accounting policy and the basis of us preparing the financial statement is on a modified cash standards. So the expense is recognized in the year that it occurred. So I just want confirmation whether that is so. Yeah, that's the one. And then secondly, Chair, in terms of contingent liabilities, and I think that what Dr. Klutter earlier mentioned about the medico-legal unit and all those sort of um, sort of, assurances that's being sort of built into the process to minimize liability. I think it speaks to for a health department, it speaks to the number of the amount for contingent liability for this, the year under review, which is 500,000 rand. Then let me just annex 2, which is minuscule, Chairperson, in my mind, for a department of this size. So just assist me if I'm correct in terms of understanding it like that, and if that is so, then it is a huge feat. But could just broadly speaking, Chairperson, I mean, there's just historical contingent liability that exists. Could we just get a brief sort of update in terms of the historical ones of you know, it's quite substantial historically speaking. And then furthermore, Chair, and I think it's the last question, it's page 245, is medical bursaries. It's up 8 million rand. It's an increase primarily driven by cleanup of medical bursary debtors book by focusing on aged and prescribed debt. Our sort of debtors control unit, you know, I mean, we're talking about prescribed debt. How much of that is prescribed debt, you know? To what extent did we not, where there's obligation on the part of the beneficiaries, notify these, you know, debtors that the debt needs to be paid? And I mean, did we allow non-notification for a period of 3 years and beyond, and then we find ourselves in a situation that the debt is prescribed and we have to write it off now? And I mean, if you, so that, and then lastly, Chairperson, the internal audit report reveals that there is a risk as far as contract management. Let me just get back to it quickly. Just where's the report now? Here we go. Saying that as an emerging risk is ITC, ICT, contract management and governance sort of architecture that exists. And could we just get a sense of in terms of our IT security environment, how comfortable are we with the, you know, that security environment? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kago.
Thanks, Chair. I'm on page 240. Regarding the aid assistance not received, just want to understand that would this be attributed to be an achievement that was never realized, or what could be the layman simplistic explanation of this? Because if I note there, it's regarded as it's referred to here. Aid assistance not received relates to government funding from USAID, expenditure of which is claimable by the department on achieving the predetermined milestones. Is it still out there hanging, or what should, hey, it can fall anytime? Hey, the department has got needs. Can you try and explain this in simple terms? Because we don't want to look at it as a loss or to find out it might be an achievement for the department. The second question is on 256, an irregular expenditure of 42.9 million. I see that it might be a drop in an ocean in your understanding, but just make me understand that what is the outcome of this? Is there any steps taken, and then if it resulted in any of the staff members in your establishment being taken to task about it? Thank you.
Which page were you referring to? 256.
256. Sure.
Similar on 296 as well, which I was going to ask about, but it's fine. Honorable Venvogel.
Dankie, Chairperson. Chairperson, in Afrikaans sê ons moet ons bors skoon maak. Perhaps you saw my face when Honorable Member America was trying to answer on behalf of the department. I hate it. He's an honorable member. If he's not part of us, then he must go and sit on the other side. So I want to thank the HOD for also always answering our questions. Doesn't matter if we are not happy always with the answers, but you are always willing to answer. And I like that you are honest in your answer. Doesn't matter if you accept failure and try to do better. That's what I love about this HOD of the department. But nevertheless, Chairperson, my question is on page 221, the administration part. I just want to check with the department how much of the department's budget was taken from the provincial reserves to respond to the pandemic during the year under review, and how much of that was spent. Then secondly, Chair, on page 222, why was the postgraduate specialty training not accredited, and what is the update regarding appointment of relief staff, and how many will be appointed? Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Venvogel. I'm glad you did not respond to that, Honorable America. Otherwise, so yeah, let's take it in a Scopa spirit. Now, I wanted to ask on the issue of the Auditor General's report. They indicate, obviously, on page 2 that the under expenditure is 0.97 on the Auditor General's report on page 2. Page 2 of the Auditor General report. Oh, you don't have the privilege of having it. Okay. So, but it says there is disclosed on page 11 of the department's annual report, the Western Cape Department of Health spent 27.9 billion of a budget appropriation of 28.2 billion, resulting in an overall under expenditure of 273 or 0.97. No, it's 0.9, but in actual figure, it's a big figure. It's 200 million. That can be, but then there are enough municipalities that their whole total budget is that amount. So it's quite in figures. To you it's small, but then I think when I look at page 11, the biggest item there is I think it's the infrastructures on clinics. Although it's on clinics now. It's the issue of health facility. Was it clinic that was supposed to be built? They could not be built. Maybe what might have been the reason and the causes that why they were not actually built. Now, I think in your opening remarks, HOD, you also mentioned that you were going to do, I think it's a national directive that there must be separate audit of PPE. I don't know whether do you have any such thing, or is there any audit of that nature? As you know, that has been one of the most controversial expenditures right through the COVID right throughout the country. Then my last question, it's almost related to the question asked by Machego on page 296 says that the bulk of the irregular expenditure is a result of supply chain procedures not being at year end. There were 1,300 cases outstanding, totaling that amount. If maybe you can just some explanation on that as to what might. And I'm fine from my side. I'll hand over to you, HOD.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So if I can start with Member van der Westhuizen. So Member van der Westhuizen, your questions of the specifics on 222 and 224, Mr. K will specifically answer those specific questions. But I think you make an observation to then ask a question. Will this improve post-COVID? And that's what he will concentrate on, to say that those notes are quite clear. We didn't spend as we should have. What will it look like now that we've emerged from COVID? So he will give you an indication of what it will look like during this year and what we expect to happen. And then the question of whether any of that money that was not spent, whether it was rolled over, which is linked to your question, whether it came from a provincial or from a national source. So he will give you that specific answer. And then Ms. Hurst will answer the inventory system introduction challenge, because that's her area of expertise. So we'll come back to those two. Member America, so the audit cost, the CFO will respond on the audit cost, but we have got as I said earlier, a very good relationship with the AG. And we understand, he was previously also an auditor, so he understands what it is that we actually are paying for. And then he will explain the contingent liability issue, because we don't keep medical legal under that item. It's on a different item, but he will explain that. And then the issue of bursaries, this issue about the cleanup and aged and prescribed, he will also go into a little bit more detail. The contract management around ICT, maybe I should just address that issue, because as I explained to Member Kleko earlier, we currently have two risks that's at extreme level, and it is being managed by our senior management team. ICT risk is one of the two. And therefore, at this point in time, Ms. Nkosi is the risk owner, but as a senior management team, we own it specifically. What we're doing is we're working very clearly with CEI, so it's the Center of E-Innovation in .P, but we're also working with CETA on that specific risk. So your specific question about IT security, I was part of a provincial top management meeting yesterday where CEI tabled a IT security strategy for the province, which obviously will apply to us as well. So it's all the things about, ransomware and what is our risks and where do we sit and all of those things. And actually, with our engagement with CEI last year, we safeguarded most of our IT operations. So touch wood, we've not actually had any major breaches. We had some small breaches which were addressed, sorted out within a space of 48 hours, actually didn't go beyond that. But what we do as part of our ICT risk is that we have quite significant contracts in place with big providers, and the biggest provider. We currently have mitigated a significant risk by safeguarding our resources, and we actually have a scenario A, B, C, D. If anything goes, that we will actually intervene and safeguard the best interests of the department and the public money. Member Kleko, the aid assistance, it's a technical issue, the government-to-government money, and Mr. K will explain the technicality for this specific financial statement. But gladly to say that we are receiving money from the American government directly, and we're putting it to good use. So he will explain that to you. The irregular expenditure, he will give you a good explanation of what lies in the irregular expenditure. And Chairperson, that's linked to your question of 296 also in terms of irregular expenditure in the supply chain process. Then Member Windvogel, just on COVID, my understanding is, and Mr. K, you can clarify, that the bulk of the COVID allocation we got this year is almost exclusively from a national conditional grant. So it is not from, we used to have COVID from provincial money. I must stop. Okay, so you will clarify. You will clarify what that split is, because you're asking how much of that COVID money comes from a national conditional grant and how much, actually now I remember, how much of the money did we carry over? Yeah, okay. So you will put that together. But more important to your next question is the issue about relief staff on page 222. And Mr. K will explain to you what we've done in terms of relation. Then I think the issue, Chair, that you ask about the 273 under expenditure at health facilities is the majority of it. The second one is admin, but again, Mr. K will explain that. And then the PPE findings, he will explain, but yeah, we basically walk away without any adverse finding against our department in broad summary from all the external agencies. And then the irregular expenditure. Mr. K, so you are actually managing all the replies. Thank you.
Thank you, HOD. I might delegate one or two with your permission, and possibly Mrs. Aris on accreditation, a question around accreditation. So I think a number of these are linked. So I'm going to try and answer them in terms of a story and an explanation as to the linking. So let me start with the under expenditure. So the under expenditure primarily came out of infrastructure space, as well as the COVID expenditure that we were keeping in the administration space. So we speak in terms of services about displaced services and the fact that we had to do certain things during COVID, which focused us on certain clinical services, and other services then had to take a little bit of a backseat. And the reality is the same thing happened in other spaces, and it's quite obvious in infrastructure, because our infrastructure budget, particularly around some of the maintenance, is very much tied to things like the Tygerberg revitalization. And the team that is supposed to be managing a lot of that maintenance was asked not to manage those projects. They needed to refocus themselves on things like the vaccination stations, putting of those things. So we moved their focus from the routine day-to-day to fixing emergencies as they came up, but also having to focus on our COVID response during this time. And that's why we're seeing a fairly substantial under expenditure within that. That includes the conditional grant, the HFRG, which sits within, which sits within that infrastructure program space. We have got full rollovers for that. And we will be putting that money back into the adjustment budget now. And then the under expenditure that we have with within the infrastructure space, again, we are allowed to move that because it becomes a timing difference. We have a really good relationship with our provincial treasury that allows us to take savings, and these are savings, and these are timing differences, and surrender them back at a point in time to be given that money down the road when we need to catch up with a particular service. And that's what's happening with the infrastructure space. And so while the optics may not look particularly good, the reality is most of it is deferred expenditure, which we will incur during this year. And again, because it's infrastructure, you don't catch it up in 1 year. You know, the whole of the infrastructure program has actually been delayed by COVID. So we're going to have quite a while to catch up with the infrastructure, particularly the planned kind of maintenance. The emergency maintenance will continue as and when it occurs, but again, that's also going to impact our abilities. The question then also links to why we've got so much under expenditure in program 1. So again, we were given 800 odd million rand from the provincial reserves. And we were given about 400 odd million rand in a couple of grants nationally. Some of it was for vaccines, some of it was put within the HIV and AIDS conditional grant. But again, we didn't really know what to expect with the expenditure. And as it turned out, we spent about 80 million rand less on a combination of PPE and on a combination of testing. And we used that money, or we surrendered that money back because we didn't need it in that year. But then we got significantly less money out of the national space for this current year. In fact, we've got a princely sum of 156 million rand in terms of conditional grants for this year compared to what we were having last year. So again, we were utilizing and creating a buffer that we could move that if we had pressures this particular year. And that is, we've always had that relationship with our provincial treasury, and it's very good because again, it creates this culture within an organization that you mustn't spend for the sake of spending. You must spend in terms of your plans, and if you underspend, it's not a bad thing because it's not being viewed as an under expenditure, it's being viewed as a saving. And so you see, yes, I agree, Chair, it looks like a huge amount of money, and it is. Absolute 273 million rand is a lot of money. But we would rather show the saving, surrender it, and then spend it when we need to, or if we don't need to, then we've surrendered it back to the fiscus. And I think that's a prudent and responsible way of us managing our finances. So the high audit costs. So glad you asked that question. No, so Chair, and it links also, Chair, to your question about the special audits. So we must just cast our minds back to when this financial year began and what we went through. We were coming off wave 2, where we didn't know where to turn. That was Delta, and we'd had a whole lot of deaths. We then moved into Beta. We then moved into another massive wave, which was Delta, which went on for about 4 or 5 months. We then went into Omicron. So that's the context that we were doing this in. And the Auditor General was asked to do, it was 2 PPE audits and a sector audit, on top of delaying the 2020 audit into the 2021 year and starting to do the work for the 2022 year. So there was we joked with the Auditor General that we missed them for about a month of that year, and that was right at the beginning of that. But we were assured, and that there was SIU that was also involved in certain investigations. We were really full of assurance last year. And it shows in terms of the audit fee. I will say that with the Auditor General, the fee that is charged is a fair fee. It's for work that has been done, and the relationship that we have with the Auditor General is a very good, open, and honest relationship, which again stands us in very good stead in terms of being able to manage what we have to manage and respecting the role that the Auditor General has in this space. The aid assistance, so this, Dr. Kluti started to go there, but we've actually, the first provincial department to actually have a government-to-government aid agreement. It happens to be with USAID. But there are a number of aid assistance that happened in the national space, but this was the first one that was done in the provincial space. There's a lot of regulation that goes behind it, so the money from USAID still has to come through National Treasury, which then has to transfer to the provincial treasury, that then comes to us. And what happened is we'd already incurred some of the pre-incurred some of the expenses that we had the signed agreement for, and we were waiting for the money to then be reimbursed us. Subsequently, it has come through, and that will continue. So we won't be seeing this almost, I won't call it a prepayment, but we'd incurred expenditure prior to receiving the funding. So irregular expenditure. Again, I don't want to sound flippant, because irregular expenditure, 42 million rand again, is a fairly substantial amount of money. And we must recognize that there is irregular expenditure within the organization. And we must understand and appreciate that we must manage the internal control system, but we must also manage the consequence management and the condonation. We understand that, and we do that. But again, there's a little bit of devil in the detail, which, and if we look at, was page 256. So if one looks at page 256, we started with a cumulative opening balance of 58 million rand. We managed to move through 24 million rands worth of condonation. That's not condoned by ourselves. The condoning authorities are the provincial treasury. So there is a whole governance structure that sits. So we submitted more than the 24 million, but they came back to us and said, we're not comfortable with the evidence that you submitted. Please go back. So we've got a line list that we are working through our facilities to get the required information and documentation so that we can then have this assessed by an independent body. And that independent body also considers the disciplinary or corrective action that we have taken, dependent on the circumstances and the situations that are applicable. So not all irregular expenditure is going to result in somebody paying back, refunding the state. Refunding the state. Sorry, Chair. There is a requirement to assess whether value for money was achieved. So, for example, if one looks in our current year, we had 7 million rands worth of irregular expenditure. Now, I'm not convinced that you're going to find certainly not another health department in this country that comes close to this. And there are many smaller departments that don't come up with this. Even National Treasury's got a greater irregular expenditure balance than us. But when I talk about the value for money, we need to look on page 257, which gives the reasons. So if one looks at the biggest amount, it says supplier not registered on relevant database, no valid CSD tax certificate. Now, this is something that we've discussed at length with the audit committee, but this is basically medicine suppliers who say, that's nice, we've got the drugs, we're not going to register on the CSD, but we'll sell you the drugs. We won't comply with that particular area. You want them from us? And so we therefore have an irregularity from a process point of view, but there is still value for money, and we are still buying drugs where there is a stock out with the normal suppliers for the benefit of service delivery and our clients. And if we were to say, no, we're not going to do that because that's irregular expenditure, I think we've missed the spirits in which we should be engaging and interacting. And so we can go through. There is enormous complexity, and we talk about it. So the supply chain rules, and you will be aware, the supply chain has really been in a real state of flux. That includes this particular period. And the reality is, not everybody knows all the rules all the time. And therefore, we are going to make mistakes. We've got to learn from those mistakes. We've got a training unit. I mentioned earlier, we've got the internal control unit. They don't only check, they train on common issues that they are finding. And we are also seeing how we can then integrate our supply chain team to prevent rather than cure. But I think really we monitor this very carefully, and I think from our own perspective as management, we feel that the risk is managed And I think it's demonstrated through by this. I think that's me, Chairperson. Thank you.
Ms. Hurst will issue of the inventory, and then Ms. Aris will just talk about the relief staff. Thank you.
Thank you, actually. On the audit risk that was raised by the AG, it is an audit risk. Currently, we are reporting on the inventory on Annexure 5. You will see that on page 290. The systems that we are currently using is Logos, CISPRO, and JAC for the medicines. So that is where we get our figures from. The amount that we are reporting on is then on the stock that is currently in the stores. So it's not issued stock. The emerging risk is that we are supposed to then also report on the issued stock to the wards and the clinics. And therefore, National Treasury is aware of it, and they are currently enhancing throughout the periods. We get an enhancement nearly every month now on Logos to sustain and support the Logos system, to gear us to get to the point where we will be able to then obviously report on these figures as well. So we are aware of it, and the systems are being updated accordingly. Thank you.
Mrs. Aris, just the question on 222.
Thank you. So, firstly, in terms of a workforce, you need different categories of staff. So, in the nursing category, you need specialty staff in different areas like midwifery and psychiatry and specialized nurses. So, the entire country was not able to, well, all HEIs could not train because of the accreditation process that was not completed by higher education. But I'm happy to say, very proud to say, that the Western Cape College of Nursing and the EMS College are both now being accredited to be higher education institutions. And so therefore we were able to advertise our intake, advertise that people can apply to do advanced midwifery as well as the B degree. And in that, we've already appointed some relief staff, but because of the time delay, it will happen as from continue to happen into next year. Thank you.
Sorry, Chairperson, Mr. Kay missed 2 questions.
My apologies, Chair, and thank you for indulging me. So the first question was around bursaries. So there is a rigorous case or a rigorous process that we follow when chasing up bursaries. But the reality is the economic and employment situation in this country is not looking particularly great. We have a lot of people that have had bursaries who either haven't been able to complete their studies or find themselves unemployed. And so we went through a database cleanup to clear all of those things. Because I don't think it's morally correct for us as a government to be holding a debt against somebody who is unable to repay those. Those people that are able to repay.
Otherwise, you're creating poverty.
So
creating poverty.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And so it might not look great from an optics perspective here, but behind each of these people is a story, and a story of relief. And I think that for me is more important than the fact that we wrote off 8.5 million rands worth of debt. If a person can pay, it's the same it's the same principle with patient fees. If you can pay for a service and you can afford it, you must pay. But if you can't pay for a service, there's absolutely no ways that we would ever deny service. And that's why we write off debt. And I'm proud that we write that off, because we do the assessment of whether there is somebody is able to pay or not. The last question was on contingencies and medico-legal. So there's 3 elements to medico-legal. So you were focusing on the contingency. There's actually 3. There's contingency, there's provision, and payables. So depending on where we are within the process, we will classify them accordingly. So contingency is a possible settlement. So there are fewer possible settlements this year than there were in the previous year. However, the provision has gone up, and the provision has gone from 351 to 426 million. That is where we've conceded merits, but now we're arguing about the quantum. And the payable is the amount that we have agreed to pay, but we have not yet paid at the end of the year. Now, the reality is when we take those three things together, in 2021 it was 462 million, in 2022 it was 454 million, which is 65 cases in the previous year and 64 cases in the current year, or the year that we're looking at. You will see in the admin that there was some under expenditure in the, so if you look at the actual expenditures between the 2 years, there was a lower medico-legal payment, and that was because we had a higher provision. So those amounts hadn't been paid at the end of the year. The reality, however, is when we come back here next year, you're going to see a reversal of that. You're going to see a higher expenditure, and that is because that provision has now moved to a payable and is actually now sitting in the appropriation. Now I'm done. Thank you, Chair.
Honorable Ngondo, is that the previous hand?
Yes, Chair.
The previous hand?
It's not previous, Chair. I did raise, but I think I raised too late for you to see my hand in the first round of Part E.
It's current.
Yebo.
Please go ahead, Honorable.
Thank you. Chair, I would like, I think I've got a number of questions to ask. Let me just hit and see what I can quickly push through. I think it's 246 on my electronic copy, which speaks to the, I think it's the, sorry, Chair, just want to open this. It's 246. 246. I think, Chair, yes, it's actually, it's 246. The huge and steep increase on the transport provided as part of the departmental activities. And I think there is an explanation below that speaks about the procurement of private ambulance services for interfacility. I just wanted to check if we can be provided some information of whether this would have gone to one individual contract or a number of private providers. Maybe if one can get that, and at what cost is this? And how efficient from a financial point of view the department would have sort of looked at or chosen this option, given, I think, as they explain, the environment of COVID, against trying to sort of mitigate on the costs. So that's the first one, Chair, I would like to sort of raise. And then in page 261, I just want to understand the condonement, I think, of the irregular expenditure. And amongst, I think, the reasons provided there, you know, one of it being supplier not registered. And I understand that the condonement would have been provided by Provincial Treasury, but my understanding, or my little understanding, would be that the department would have written the recommendation to Provincial Treasury. And therefore, I would be interested to know what would be the rationale to sort of condone such against all of those reasons, including, and I'm making a typical reference to this one, a supplier not registered, which is supposedly to be non-compliant according to sort of public procurement rules, that you're not supposed to be trading with a supplier that is not registered, unless maybe better details can be provided by the department in that regard. And then 262 and 263, in 263, if they can just explain the details, I think, of that fruitless and wasteful expenditure. I understand there's an indication there that there is apparently still some investigation, and I would retract if, based on that, the information cannot be provided at this point. But I just wanted, it's not investigation, it's actually called, it's under assessment. But I would have wanted just to get some kind of an understanding of what is the meaning of a late issuing of construction information regarding procurement of the electrical mini substation. What was involved here, maybe to just give us some kind of explanation. And before that one, in 262, Chair, I think there is a prior year error around the irregular expenditure. If also that can just be explained, perhaps as a for a lay person like me, what does that mean? If you refer to a prior year error in as far as the irregular expenditure. So, Chair, I would just end on those ones for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Honorable Ngondo. Are you fine inside? It's hot, ne? Let's allow the department to respond, and maybe we'll take a break after that. Which is strange. It's normally very cold here. I think there's something, it's not right somewhere. Let's give the department.
So thank you very much, Chairperson. So just on the first question of transport, it actually is that we've moved from 73 million in the previous year to 32 million in this year. And the reason why it was decreased, as the note says, is because we stopped the red dot system, which was used via taxis to transport staff to their homes. So what the balance of the 32 million is contracting a range of private EMS providers, and that's ambulances, to complement and supplement the work of our own EMS. So there's a range of providers across the province that we then called in for certain calls when we were under pressure for specific issues. So that's the transport explanation. In terms of irregular expenditure, I think the member, Mr. K, explained the question of the not registered, which is the medicine providers. And that was the explanation that we gave, that it's big companies, it's life-saving medication, we get the medication, but they're not registered on the system. And Mr. K gave an explanation on that. And then the fruitless expenditure, which is only 12,000 for the year, but the one that the member is referring to is the 4.6 million under investigation for Gansbaai and for Vredenburg. And I'll just ask Mr. K just to quickly explain that, but the notes is actually in the, for both, is in the table that we have in page 260. Mr. K.
Thank you, HOD. So this is these are certain penalties that have been incurred on certain construction projects that have been implemented on behalf of the department by the Department of Transport and Public Works. And one of the requirements is that we disclose such in our financial statements for a completeness perspective. And that's why we call it under investigation, because it hasn't been determined whether it is or it isn't irregular expenditure, because they haven't reached final account stage necessarily on those particular matters. And then there is also a question around who is actually accountable for that. If you have an implementing agent doing work on your behalf and they incur a fruitless and wasteful expenditure, is the accountability with the Department of Health's, Wellness's accounting officer, or the Department of the implementing agent? And that's why it's been classified as under investigation. the prior year irregular expenditure. Can you answer that? So I also intimated, well, I've said a couple of times that we have teams that go around and review packs of information and documentation. And where we find errors, and some of these are multiple year transactions, or we will then go back and make a prior year adjustment to make sure that the expenditure is reflected in the correct year. And that's why we have these particular allowances to do that. It goes into that, it's a disclosure issue. It goes into the total balance, and then we go ahead and we investigate that particular balance as part of the total for the regular expenditure. Thank you.
Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
Chair, just a follow-up on the travel and subsistence amounts. I've gone back to the earlier annual reports for 2017-18 and 2018-19, and I see that the total amounts there were just below 40 million. So what we saw last year was a reduction even in the pre-COVID years. And I'm wondering to what extent, would we be able to continue along that trend of limiting travel and perhaps making use of technology for meetings, etc., where the physical attendance of people might not be needed. So that's my first item. The second one is just, I see one of the entities that owe you a considerable amount of money is the Road Accident Fund. I didn't see mentioned, but perhaps I may have missed it, the Workmen's Compensation Fund, I know has also got a bit of a problem or a bad track record to the extent that certain private hospitals apparently are turning patients away when they declare that, they've had an accident at work. So perhaps, Chair, we could just ask, what are you doing to try and recover those funds? And is this something which should be elevated to an intergovernmental forum for perhaps mediation and attendance to this? Or are you happy that those amounts are, as can be or could be expected? Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks, Chairperson. So, thank you for
Chair.
Van der Westhuizen.
Yes.
Can I also add my follow-ups before HOD answers?
Yes, then we know. No problem.
Okay. No, thank you, Chair. Can I just ask the HOD if I had him incorrectly, maybe he would correct me. Is he saying between the Blue Dot versus using the private EMS, from a cost point of view, is using the private EMS more cost effective than the Blue Dot? That's my first one. My second one, Chair, is that I just want to understand from the department is that given the COVID environment, and I think the actually also a reference made by also Minister of some of the people that would have, gotten ill in the course of work. I'm just wondering, how does the department deal with that in relation to the concept of injury on duty? Is there a provision in the policies and also any particular up during the period of COVID that would have been affected by COVID?
Can you repeat the last part where we were talking about in particular? We lost you there. Honorable Ngondo. Honorable Ngondo. I think let's just continue. If it comes back, I will ask you to repeat the last part of the question. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. So, as Honourable Van der Westhuizen rightfully says, in the transport expenditure, lies a range of other factors. So what you need to realize is that in 1819, maybe 1920 to some extent, a lot of what our transport was for traveling of staff. And obviously there were some smaller items for other transport, but that was the main expenditure. So when you get into the COVID years, which is 2021 and then 21-22, transport shot up to 73 million. But that was, in that 73 million, all the travel for meetings disappeared. That 73 million was almost exclusively, well, it was two big things. It was, firstly, the red dot system, which is we worked with the Transport and Public Works, with the taxi industry for transporting our staff, firstly, but also transporting people to quarantine and isolation facilities. And later in that year, we had some contracting for private ambulances when we got the December, January big second wave. So we only started, a small amount of the 73 was for that. So just for member in Kontlu, the red dot and the transport EMS is two completely different things. It is just that red dot was the majority of the payment in that year, with a little bit of payment for private ambulances, which was a completely different function. It's an ambulance function to move sick patients around. When we got into this financial year, the 21-22, the red dot was discontinued. What we expanded was the expenditure, because the private sector ambulance service worked so well in that latter part of that year. Almost the exclusive 30 million was exclusively almost for the private EMS service as a separate service. What Member van der Westhuizen is asking, once this settles in, because it sounds like this private EMS system works so well in this, the reporting year, we've continued it into the current year. But what is now starting to happen is potentially that people start going back to meetings and all of those. So we are very, very cognizant of maintaining that for preference, we want virtual meetings, and preference is not to have high expenditure to reintroduce the travel expenditure that pre-existed COVID. And that is also linked to our own policy internally of having hybrid working hours as well. So hybrid facilities for working. So you're right, we need to learn from COVID, maintain some of the best practices, and look at practices that doesn't balloon out expenditure again for what would be for tasks that could be done by a different means. So for instance, myself and all the other colleagues, we almost exclusively ask our national colleagues to have a hybrid option for a meeting. To fly up and down to Joburg for a 2-hour, 3-hour meeting is definitely not something that we countenance or think is a worthwhile use of resources. That then does take us to your question about RAF and COIDA. And the RAF issue is of such a nature that we have probably one of those benchmark activities, which is a revenue team that does everything they can to get every potential revenue into our system. That revenue team has got to the point where they fly up, they give, they spoon feed the RAF to say, yeah, it is in your system, loaded, just pay, press pay. Now, we actually get more money out of RAF than other provinces, or we had gotten it to a certain point. What has happened with RAF is they have introduced more stringent rules. They almost make it impossible to get anything out of them now. So we've got to the point where we've escalated it to the National Department and National Treasury to say that this needs to be addressed and be addressed at National Treasury, National Department and National Department of Labour issue. And if not, then we are motivating via the CFO forum nationally to declare an interdepartmental dispute in terms of this. So that process we've already executed. That brings me to COIDA, and Mrs. Aris can just reflect on COIDA, because again, we have a streamlined process for every injury on duty for the claims, administratively managed very, very effectively from our organization. But the issue is obviously the payments that comes from the Department of Labor and the actual fund, from the actual fund. Mrs. Arings?
Thank you, Dr. Klute, and thank you for the question. I think firstly, in terms of the period under review, that many of the COVID cases that was registered, I have a centralized team and everything come via them, facilities and institution provided through that. And we then have a very tight engagement with the Department of Labor. In fact, we've had, well, we are very fortunate that we have the doctor that comes and sits with us to go through the cases, but there are still many that have not. And yes, as alluded by one of the members, that there are backlogs, and there have been backlogs where practitioners were not paid. So it's a continuous engagement with us, with the Department of Labor, and to get these things going. We have a system, we follow up with them, we have access to their system. Yes, problematic as it sometimes is, we're really trying to keep it tight to make sure that things get paid. It's not perfect, but because we have such a continuous engagement, there has been lots of improvement.
Just to conclude, we assume that Member Nkondla's question was related to injury on duty and related to COVID claims. So that was why we responding to the last one, in addition to Member van der Westhuizen's question on COIDA, that is the issue. And hopefully I've explained to Member Nkondla also the difference between Red Dot and the private ambulance and the expenditure across the 2 years. Thank you.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add on the transport, on the red dot and the blue dots and all of those, because I heard Member Nkondla was talking about the blue dot. For the health, we didn't use the blue dot. We started with a red dot light, which is for the staff, and then we had now red dot, which was for the patients, for the quarantine, for the isolation, and also for those who were also even discharged from there. And then the other part of the private ambulance, which is, it must be an ambulance because it's a taxi. These are the quantums the red dots we're talking about. Like you get a case in most of the municipalities outside the metro municipalities, where you'll find that they've got 2 ambulances. And also noting like they have got 1 24-hour, which is a hospital. All other services during the day are the clinics. So those 2 ambulances will find that it might be an ambulance that have to take patient from that hospital to go outside to the referral hospital. And then you end up having 1 ambulance that remains there. Hence the issue of the private ambulance, because it's mostly, as you know, when we do the licensing of the ambulances, they will have been given the license to operate in that particular area. So it makes it easier for that ambulance, which operates, let's say, in Optiberg, Wetzenberg, and also parts of the northern parts of there. They know each and every area there. So when they're being called from the clinic in that area to take the patient to serious hospital, therefore it makes it easier for them in regard to that, instead of taking the fully fledged ambulance that will have taken a very sick patient going outside. So just to get an understanding in terms of what is the difference. Having said that, I need also to commend in absentia the taxi industry, because during the time of the COVID, because the red dot, it started, I think, around about May 2020 when it started, when the people have to go to Lagoon Beach and all of those. And also when our staff, when we're saying to the people, stay at home, we have got this. But who was going to transport our health workers, especially during the level 5 lockdown? Even our own, like the EMS, they were even scared to go nearer to the COVID patients. Understandable, because it was a new scary virus. No one knew anything about it. There was a time that even some of our staff were demanding the moon suit goggles and the boots and all of those. But look at what the taxi industry did. These are the people who transported the staff whom they, of course, they'll know that they are working with a COVID. And yet without even extra protective clothing. Yes, they did their taxis where they have even the sanitizer and then the separation, plastic inside and all of those, and have to meet requirements. That's why it was red dot light, because it was kind of executive minibus kind of. But that during the time that no other form of transportation that was there, even the planes were not even flying. Everyone was scared, but the taxi industry took the patients to and from quarantine isolation, took our staff. That's the only form of transportation that could be able to take the ordinary public, take the patients, they take the staff. So we need to commend them for such. It's a pity that now I'm talking specifically for the Department of Transport, that some of these services, not now for the red dot, I'm talking now for the blue dot, which is theirs, not ours, that it will come to an end in regard to that. Because for us, they did quite well when it comes to bringing us up at the time that we're at our worst moments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, if there are no questions from your side, I want to check whether I take it, Minister, you are finished with your closing remarks. That was, in a way, your parting shot.
Yes, Chair. Thank you very much, because I've already done the opening of thanking everyone. That was my parting shot, that there are people in this room who did very well and contributed in the in the financial period year that we're talking about. They are not there. Our staff who are district or sub-district managers, medical managers, everyone who contributed to this, because it was a difficult year. And also the communities themselves, the traditional health practitioners, everyone who contributed. And of course, and some of you, Chair, where you'll be highlighting to us that something is happening there. Can you please respond to all of those? So thank you very much. And lastly, of course, to the audit committee and also to the AG. Thank you very much.
Judy?
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and really thank you to the committee. We take the role of the committee very seriously. So thank you for also bringing the oversight, asking the probing questions. It is actually a privilege for us to be held accountable. We take it as a privilege. And thank you for the Auditor General for walking a path with us, and the Audit Committee and Internal Audit in .P. We are very grateful and thankful that we can work in a system where accountability, checks and balances work. We are subjecting ourselves to it. And as I said, I would just like to leave but saying that the staff members that are with us in the room and the ones that is in the services outside the room have done us proud, but we continue to see the need to grow, to improve, to always find new things to improve, and so that the conversation the next time is a clear conversation against the context of the data in front of you that shows more progress towards an effective and trusted healthcare system in the Western Cape. So thank you very much, Chairperson and the committee members.
AG, to say anything in rounding up?
Chairperson, yeah, I think just to emphasize what the HOD has said, that and the CFO throughout the session, is we are very appreciative of the working relationship we have with this department. It really makes our audit process easier and makes it us able to easier conclude on this audit. So we are very appreciative of that, and also the role that the audit committee plays throughout the audit process. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, AG, and also to the audit committee as well in absence for the work that we are doing and being our partners in this accountability ecosystem. We value very much your support and your cooperation and collaboration thank you very much, Department, for the presentation you've made and the report you've presented to us, and also answering some of the not so easy question. Normally say to people that when we ask this question, we are not trying to catch you up, nor are we in a witch hunt. We are not in a witch hunt at all, because I think we are not sangomas. So we are grateful in the manner you have actually responded and answered this question, and I'm sure you've learned that we are not a difficult person, but also we are not easy people either. They might ask uncomfortable questions, it's not to catch you up. Thank you very much for your responses. We are going to be continuing with our meeting and looking into what resolution we can take so that you will communicate with you and respond you to that. I think what we'll do then, honorable members, in thanking the department and allowing it to leave so that we can continue, maybe we should just break until past while they are leaving. In the meantime, maybe we can just go and quickly go for refreshment. Please join us in the refreshments there. And then we are going to come back at past as the committee to continue and finalize our work in 15 minutes. It's 15:15 now.
Sorry, Chair. Can't we just allow the department to go, and if they want to go enjoy the refreshments, and we stay behind and just conclude ours, and then we can have tea.
I think when there were some members are already up, they want to stretch legs. You know.
number of officials in the public health that were affected by COVID, and how many of them got that compensation of COIDA, those that have been done and cases that are still in process. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Ngondlo. Any other addition, honorable members? If there is no addition, then honorable members, I think let me make use of the opportunity to thank you again for actively participating in the annual report of the Department of Health, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.